Welcome to Intimacy Evolution, the podcast that helps you enjoy deeper connection and more intimacy in your relationships. I'm Brianna Carey, relationship and intimacy coach, and together with my husband Mark, a licensed professional counselor, we're here to help couples create the relationships they crave. Relationships evolve over time, and that's okay. Let's talk about it.
Hi.
Hi. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited.
This is cool. I'm excited too. I'm turning bright red.
Yeah, I love this. That's our first in-person interview, and it is such like an honor to have like my OG coach in person here. So welcome back to Intimacy Evolution. We are here today with Abigail Gazda, and she is rolling through town in her van and visiting for a couple of days, which is so fun to show her our new stomping ground, showing her around Northwest Arkansas, and yeah, just enjoying being with her. So we're like, hey, you want to do a podcast?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked, because that wasn't part of the plan. And then on the way, it's like, oh, I'm so glad you thought of that.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Again, excited to have you back. And a lot has happened in 2 years since you were last on the podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, like reintroduce yourself. I know we have a lot of new listeners too. So who's Abigail?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Abigail, and I'm a clarity coach. I'm the CEO of Hearts Unleashed. I host the Hearts Unleashed podcast, which Brianna's been on. And we've, I kind of feel like introducing from this is like just being on a journey of getting to work with people. And that, like she mentioned, I'm traveling in the van. And so that has been an evolution of my journey. I started coaching 2016 and have just evolved through that. Author, publisher, again, podcaster, and have built my own curriculum for transformation and through getting to share that, but also host like book clubs and stuff. And I love to do one-on-one work and business coaching and consulting, but I also really love the group work, which you guys are very familiar with. So same realm. And then just that piece of the van life of getting to be here in person is so fun, and getting to see your kiddos grow up like year to year, just how tall and how many more words they have and all that. Like, I think it's beautiful.
All the fun stories that they've got to share.
Yep. And the joke about, because I just came from Missouri where I was hanging out with a client family also, and we were talking about wanting a Santa tracker, like a Abigail van tracker. And I'm like, well, me too. And for safety reasons, I try to never let people know where I'm at, but it's always after the fact.
Yeah. After, like, I was in this place. It's like, ooh, cool. I love it. And there's so many ways that we can go with this conversation. And, I love it because you came in yesterday morning at like, I don't know, 9 o'clock or something like that. And it's been like nonstop talking the whole time.
Yeah. That's how that goes.
But it's like not exhausting. There's so many ways we can go with this conversation. All of the talking we've done has just been like so energetic and just like twists and turns and just depth. And one of the things that we touched on was emotional intelligence. And I know that's your jam.
My jam. So I say I'm a clarity coach, and I talk a lot about my areas of expertise are emotional intelligence and subconscious reprogramming, because it sort of supersedes or is the undercurrent for any conversation I'm having, right? People say, I want this outcome, I want this life, I want this lifestyle, I want this career, I want this relationship, I want whatever. And we can talk about where you want to be, but we have to talk about the gap and bridging it. And that is a conversation about emotional intelligence. It's a conversation about identity and transitioning or shifting and evolving your identity. Yeah. And also the identity that comes from the past. So I love talking about the formative years and, how that has created who we think we are. So that's a start.
So as you were saying that last part of like, our formative years and sitting here with a 5 and 9-year-old, and I was like, okay, what am I teaching them? Good or bad or indifferent? Right. What are they picking up on subconsciously that is forming their identity? Yeah.
In fact, I don't remember if I actually taught this in the last episode. I might be on brand right now.
Yay.
But for all of us, we observe something, the way that our brain forms, right? We observe something, we conclude something, and then we compensate. So our identity takes shape around that compensating.
Okay.
And you and every parent ever in the world, right? So I had a mentor coach from day one who I remember her sharing, like, is this going to be the thing that fucks up my kids? Like, is this the day? Like, did their brain just form? So you could do that all day, every day with every decision you make, and they're going to draw their own conclusions, right? My mom was a single working mom. And so for me, I wanted more of her. If I had more of her, I might have turned out like, oh, she's hovering and overparenting.
Yeah.
You can't win the game. Like,
right.
You can be your best and be supportive and all that, but what clicks for them, what they observe, same for us, what clicks for us, what we observe, what we conclude, and then how we compensate for what we think is wrong or right or unjust is the way that it goes.
Yeah. And one of the parts of the conversation we were having about that, because I was sharing how I've recently realized just how much Remington is like my twin.
Yeah.
And my mirror, and things that he does is very activating for me because they were things that were shut down when I was a child.
Yes.
I was shut down for, and so sometimes I'm triggered by that and the fact that like, this isn't safe, why are you doing this? And I lash out trying to protect him. And so reprogramming that for myself and being aware, and and you were talking about like how we think mirrors are one way, but they're actually,
I'll pick up from right there, because even with that example, right, we are hardly ever parenting the kid in front of us, right? We're parenting our inner child.
Yeah.
And so this can be, which we're talking about projection, right? We're projecting onto our kiddo, onto our spouse or significant other, or at work or whatever. And so I think that's really important. And then to kind of pull back to, like, the projection piece is huge, and taking responsibility for that, because it is our responsibility. And what you were talking about with the mirror, and that oftentimes when we're projecting and judging, so like my practice is any judgment I ever have, I'm going to take it to the mirror.
Yeah.
However, when I bring it as a mirror to a client and they're judging their spouse, or we'll just use spouse. They do this and I don't like that. And I want them to change that. Right. And I say, okay, they do this and you don't like that, or they're not being considerate. In what ways are you doing something that you don't like, or you're not being considerate? And they're like, no, it's not that way. Right. So I like the giver and taker example. A giver might judge a taker and say, they do this, that's wrong, it's bad. I would never take. That's how we block the breakthrough, because we can't relate to the person. So we're thinking it's a mirror like this. They're a taker, I'm not a taker, so this doesn't fit. So the judgment doesn't stand, and then you just kind of write it off and don't have the breakthrough. But it fits like this. And so I'm a giver, that person's a taker. We fit together, we're complementary, even if the giver feels taken advantage of. So that way we can look at the judgment not from the so literal aspect. Like another good example is like a liar, right? Okay. That person's a liar. That's our judgment of they're a liar. And we are not liars. Right. I am so honest. I tell the truth all the time. Okay, maybe. Where in your life are you lying? How are you lying to yourself? Yep. Right? It's a inside job. And so your whole life doesn't have to change for your experience of life to change. Ooh, right?
I like that.
But you have to be willing to go inward and take mega responsibility. It's just like blame is so much easier. So much easier.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay.
There was a lot in there.
Yeah. I was just like, let's back up and like really dissect emotional intelligence from like the ground up. and then we can kind of like move back forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay. In what way?
So I guess like, what is it? What is,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
just what is emotional intelligence, and where do we go?
I actually really love that question. I've never been asked that straight away. And I think it is like a new term, or it could actually be jargony.
Yeah.
For people like, okay, emotional intelligence, like whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would describe emotional intelligence as the understanding the experience of the heart. Okay, like yes to the mind, because there's a ton of psychology involved, so we can go down that rabbit hole too. But for me, it's the intelligence of emotions and body wisdom. And so being able to go from here to here and listen and name a feeling, which we don't really have. There's this really cool feeling wheel, which gives a whole like slew of ways you can name emotions. Because it's not just like I'm pissed, I'm angry, I'm sad. There's way more like I feel confused, I feel defeated, I feel abandoned. Like we don't say that. Right. And so being able to hone in on our emotions and be able to look at like what those things activate within us and how our identity is tied in. So it's an awareness. Like I would call emotional intelligence a spectrum of awareness of our internal system, our internal environment. And from there, how we navigate the world and how we navigate relationships with more or less emotional intelligence, right? And like the blame and the projecting we were just talking about, like that's just a low on the scale of emotional intelligence, right? Instead of being willing to sort of take responsibility or just take a breath. We react and respond to something so quickly. It's an overcompensation. We observe, we conclude, we respond. So we compensate so quickly that we don't really take a moment to just observe and sort of witness. Right? Like, go ahead.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking like, we are conditioned to listen, to respond. Not the active listening to like receive what is being said. And process it.
And we're adding our whole filter of our worldview. So I'm not hearing what you're saying. I'm hearing what I think you
filtering
said.
It through.
I'm hearing how I perceive you. So if I think you're lazy and entitled, and then you're like, my this and that's happening, and you're actually coming to me for help, but I think you're lazy and entitled, well, that's how I'm going to respond to you. And that's not functional. It's not super, that's low emotional intelligence.
And I think that is something, like you said, this is kind of a newer term that's been coming out the past few years that we're gaining more awareness of, like, oh, okay, like how do we get, from a parent's perspective, how do we get our children to name what is going on? Or when they're younger, like feeling, what are you feeling in your body? Because that is how they don't have the vocabulary. And so sometimes I'm like, do you feel tight? Do you feel like buzzy? Do you feel, I give them different words so that, because they're not like, I feel very agitated. I feel very, we can start putting those words, but when they're younger. And so our generation didn't have that. Our parents' generation didn't have that, and it just keeps going back. And so we're having to overcome a lot of stuff. Yes. And, looking back on my childhood, we can look at how we grew up and our parents and understand that they didn't have the emotional intelligence. And they're like, oh, you're not hurt. Suck it up. You're fine. Like they didn't understand, like, oh gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that does look like it would hurt. Like, what would you like for that? Can I help you? Do you want a Band-Aid? Like,
that's actually a great point, because what you're speaking about, I like talking about the concept of it is knowing your needs, naming your needs, and then meeting your needs. Right? As adults, we are walking around, we don't necessarily know our needs. We've never been asked, what do you need right now? Not never, but hardly. And we don't ask ourselves that. And so we have a need, but we're wrapped up in the emotion. And so we're being run by the emotion. And then we can't ask for that need to be met. We also expect people to read our minds.
Yeah.
and they don't meet our needs. And that
How
causes
dare they?
resentment. So we're like projecting that we have a need, but we're not explicitly communicating that. And then we're not getting those needs met. That is a huge breakthrough in this area, because if we can know our needs, say our needs, and meet our needs, not expect your parent, husband, children, career to just assume your needs.
Right.
We can't see past our noses. And that doesn't have to be a bad or wrong thing. We are all inherently self-centered.
Yeah.
We are selfish, and it's not bad. Don't let someone convince you it's bad. Don't make it bad for someone else.
Yeah.
But so your husband is worried about what he's focused on. And then you're like, he's not listening to me. Well, have you clearly communicated? Like,
Right.
And I'm sure there's people on, again, that's a spectrum too, but just being able to communicate those needs and then communicate, I need a need met, right? If let's say it's an intimacy, right? It's like, I feel like we're not having enough sex, in this season, or I feel ignored or abandoned or not prioritized. Like, but we have to be able to communicate that, and then also hear what the person is saying. Yeah, we're still gonna say what we want to say and listen through our filter. Did I get the outcome I wanted or not? And that's basically the measurement. So it leaves very little room for conversation and creation.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
Yes. So much there. So much goodness. And so, yes, with that, I love that you're translating it into partnership as well, relationships, because, we are having to relearn this and be aware, because, what we observed growing up and how we come into a partnership, we tend to play out either what we saw growing up, or we have a very I absolutely will not be this way. And so that can also impact the communication and the connection and everything as well, because you, again, are filtering what is the experience, and you're like, well, I saw this happen in my parents' relationship and I will not be that person. And so I am going to go completely this way rather than speaking what you do want. We always focus on what we don't want.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yes.
In that moment.
And that's a perfect combination of the reaction, the compensation, right? I will not be like my parents. I will do this much better. It's still a response to something you observed.
Yeah.
So we've hardly ever we haven't, it's almost impossible to come from this blank slate growing up, right?
Yeah.
And so it's into our adulthood that we are finally given a little bit of freedom and wiggle room to say what do I want? What are my priorities? What am I passionate about, right? And we were kind of talking on the couch earlier about people who get together young and then I'm in my 30s dating and doing the thing. I've been with someone for 2 years and that's great.
Yeah.
And dating in your 30s when you've established yourself as an individual and then deciding, do I want to date that person as the individual that they are, is very different than getting together young and growing up together. And so you might have met each other from embedded in the impressions of your household or what you grew up in. And then you start to evolve as an adult and have preferences and be able to okay, well, let's take a look,
Yeah.
let's look there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Seeing a lot of that because, you're 20, you're like, oh, we know all the things. Whatever.
But do you?
You're right. And so, saying that, it's definitely a different person today than I was at 20 when we got together. And I'd hope so. Yeah. Right. I
You
sure would hope so. And choosing to go through those challenges and ups and downs of relationship and life and, being in that partnership. And like you said, even where you're at, you're choosing dating somebody. Yeah. Do I choose to be with them as they are? Yeah. Because if they do not want to, they don't have to change. Yeah. They're established in their identity as well. And it's this is who they are. And so I guess taking responsibility for that choice, that decision of like, I am choosing to be with you. Was there a subconscious, like something in the back of your brain when you got with your partner, if you're like, they're the same person and they're not doing all this stuff. And I don't know where I'm going with this thought.
No, but that's okay. Cause I'm picking up what you're putting down. And I think it's so cool because I remember saying earlier, like, I'm not a proponent for divorce. Like,
Right.
And like, disclaimer, we're talking about like healthy communication and conversations and evolution, not abuse. Right. Cause I think I love seeing people stick together. And something we talked about, if you wanted to go and throw it back to the last episode, is we were talking about, considering divorce as a real option, just to work it out of your brain, not because divorce is the best option.
Right.
It's that we use it as a threat. We use it as a bailout. We use it as a, inflated sort of reaction to something we didn't like in the relationship. And so it is almost weaponized and not empowering, right? If it's time to get divorced, it's time to get divorced. That's fine. And you could see it through also, because we were kind of talking about, oh, my partner needs to do the work if we're going to get better. So we're kind of like piling these conversations on. But that I'm so grateful to be dating in my 30s, and it's challenging. But as someone who has established myself, I do get to decide. Like, I don't think if you're dating, I'm not talking about if you're married and, you know, you can work that out. And if you're dating and you're trying to figure that out, if you go on a few dates and you already decide what you need to change about that person, you probably shouldn't be dating them. Like, there's probably someone better. And in my own personal journey, so I'm divorced from my college sweetheart, and that was really devastating. I planned on being married and working through life and doing all those things, having kiddos. And when that didn't happen, I really had to look again. And it's only hindsight that the compatibility wasn't there, right? I was someone who was willing to morph to be what my significant other needed or wanted. And so that was my own personal journey to learn how to honor myself, to not abandon myself, which does come from the formative years, right? And so I had to work through that behavior. Now, could I work through it in a relationship or out of a relationship? Yes, of course. But the gift, because I get to relate to it as a gift that I was given in divorce, right, is to find the next person and watch the compatibility or declare, this is the list. I've made many lists of the ideal man, right? And then I end up with somebody and they're 85% that, or they're 90% that, or like every time I've gone through a breakup, the person I've been with next has just gotten closer to that ideal, right? And so you can do that by dating multiple people, or you can do that by staying in a relationship with somebody and working together to grow up yourself. And that's what we were talking about on the couch, is like, it's internal, it's an inside job. And just deciding that your significant other is the one who needs to do all the work is not probably very nurturing for the relationship.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, it's like that mirror, like you said, like, what are you putting out there that you really need to be kind of like asking yourself, what else do I need to do here?
Yeah.
It's always coming back to yourself. And like you said, how you relate to the experience, you said earlier, is like, you know, how are you taking things in and how are you relating and taking ownership of the experience that you're in? And I think that's so, so important.
You know, something else that I remember talking about was we are an evolutionary species. So we are always naturally growing. But then if you're watching this, you're probably interested in self-development, right? And so when either of the partners find self-development and start on their journey, there is a natural riff because one's growing and one maybe not. And we have to take responsibility for you as the one changing might want to see the people around you grow. And they didn't choose that path. And it has become our priority to grow and evolve. And that person may be equally upset that you've changed because they were already in a relationship with someone they had agreed to be in a relationship with. And now they're in a relationship with someone they maybe haven't agreed to be in a relationship with. And so you're trying to like project, you need to change with me. When if you started the healing journey, it's likely you had that call, like there's something missing, there's something more, there's something more to me, there's something more to life. That's yours. That's like independently yours.
Yep.
And so we need to take responsibility for, if I'm unhappy or unfulfilled in any capacity, let me start here and get there, because it's very common in the relationship conversation. But let's talk about family.
Yeah.
Right? My parents are my parents. My friends are my friends. They might not be on this path. And do we grow apart? Potentially. But that doesn't mean the love is lost either. And I think that's what's really important, is I'm not trying to like exile my family from my life, right? But we don't resonate or relate on different things. And so that doesn't mean though that I can't have them in my life. And so I want to pause and like turn it over, because I think it's you probably have a lot of experience with this too.
Yeah, and that's what I'm glad you went there, because I was going to say like, oh yeah, and in relation to family dynamics, your family is your family, and you can choose the amount of interactions you have with them. And again, it is your experience. You cannot project on them or expect them, because what is my favorite phrase? Expectations are premeditated resentment.
Yeah. I love that.
And if you are expecting them to see you and take your lead, and they want to and have them do all this stuff too, that's like just setting yourself up for disappointment. Just be yourself. You're doing this for you. And so naturally they will see the change and shift. They might talk to you about it, and they might not, and that's okay. Because then again, you don't have to get upset about it. Oh, like, you're asking me about this, like, why are you not doing it too? Like, you see all the amazing things, whatever. Like, I don't know, it just popped in my head about like almost like sobriety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So somebody that is choosing a path of sobriety, and they're doing it for themselves. And if they are getting upset at everyone else for not also choosing sobriety, like, that doesn't make sense.
It's hard to work in the world that way.
And it's hard to operate. Yeah.
Something that came to me while I was starting sobriety was, I don't have to love what my people love in order to love my people.
Yes.
And then I flipped it and I said, my people don't have to love what I love in order for my people to love me.
Yes.
And it just blew everything open. So if you look at your transformational or spiritual journey as your new preference or interest or a hobby, and I don't want to mitigate it, because I live for this shit. Like, I love it. It's important. I believe in it. And if it's your interest, like if you like crafting, like if you like doing macrame, do you expect your husband to like macrame? No. Right? So it's a new interest. It's a new path. It's a new way that you spend your time and attention. And yes, will it like evolve the way you think? And I do think it affects, like, I don't love social gatherings all the time.
Yeah.
Especially as a sober person. And so I do have different interests, but that doesn't mean I can't also create an engaging interaction, an in-depth conversation. It's likely, especially because I live a public life, so people know my interests. Yeah. So they will approach me about my interests. So that's cool now, but that wasn't always the case. Right. And so being able to treat it for what it is, and let it be special to you without it needing to be special to everyone around you, where it like degrades the sanctity of it for you.
Yes, that, because I was like, it's your thing, be excited about it. If you're trying to talk to other people about it, you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And they're like, okay, cool. Like, we have some friends that when Mark and I are talking about stuff, you can just definitely see like the like, yeah, they're like, oh, okay. And we're like, it's all right. Like, and we just talk about it, and because they love us, they will sit there and listen. Are they going to join us at the next event that we go to? No. And that's okay. We don't expect that. Right. But the fact that they can sit there and just be like, oh, cool for you, you know, and that's fine.
Oh, and that when that happens, because we were talking a lot about that, also the independent journey is we start to feel isolated or like,
Yes.
woe is me, nobody understands me, this and that. But I think you guys are a great example is if you get, there's grief. You have to grieve who you've lost. You have to grieve what was. Your lifestyle has changed. But then you're calling in new.
Yeah.
You have to burst past the isolation barrier of like, nobody gets me, I'm alone. People get so stuck there. Don't get stuck there.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck in the isolation. Woe is me. Nobody gets it. There are so many people who get it.
So many.
We have communities full of people who get it.
Yes.
And we create that on purpose. Like I'm so obsessed with what I talk about that I just want to talk about it all day, every day. That's what we're doing. We're spending our Saturday afternoon talking about emotional intelligence. Like how freaking cool.
Yay.
And so you find people who are equally interested, and there will be more duality.
Yeah.
And both can exist. You can have pieces and parts of your old life and your new life. You don't have to leave everything. I had that fear.
Yeah.
I've had that fear over the years. Like the more I evolve, the more I lose. And in a way it's true, but I won't lose the core things that I value.
Right. And it's, are you losing, or are you now seeing through, again, a different lens or filter of the things that no longer serve you?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean they were wrong or bad, but they got you to where you were to make that next step in your journey.
Yeah.
And I think just acknowledging that and the different parts of us that we had to be in order for us to yes, we had to have that certain part of us to experience that part of life to get us through whatever season we were in. And I love that you related it to a hobby. Like, yeah, I don't expect Mark to like jump on the couch with me and crochet and do all those things. Mountain biking's his thing. I'll pop in and do it every so often. But it's not my passion. I don't want to be like, hey, I want to go ride a bike today. Like, I will go ride a bike and be a part of that experience with him. And just like if I asked him to help me with a craft project, he's helped me. But it doesn't mean like he's like, oh, let's go get out the Cricut. I have a new project. And so I think that bringing it back into, you know, partnership, relationship, family, whatever, if you stay your path because it is something that you enjoy and it is what you are wanting to do, if you are not trying to force it upon your people, like family, friends, partner, then they get to come around in their own time. And that could look like, instead of being combative and be like, well, why are you doing these silly things? Why are you going and doing chanting? And why does the house smell like this sage? And like all this stuff. And instead of being combative about it, it becomes more neutral.
Yes.
And that is supportive.
Yes.
Right? They're like, okay, like this is your thing. That's what you do. Okay, great. And so I think just putting it into those perspectives too of like, it's okay.
I love it. And I love, you were kind of alluding to like the genuine sharing of it, right? I'll listen to Vince talk about things that are far beyond my brain, you know, or you know, he's an avid hunter, and I love that. Like, I love seeing him energized by it.
Yes.
So like, why wouldn't I support something like that?
Yes.
Or when he's out snowboarding, like I see him get giddy, like he's so excited, and I love that for him. Yeah. And I'm a terrible snowboarder, but I'm actually a good skier, and so like now I get to go out, and so you get to share that, but it might not be the thing that wakes you up in the morning, or like, especially if you have a mathematical brain person and you're a word person, like, or just like whatever the differences is. And like, we could go into human design, we can go into Zodiac, we can go into Enneagram, like we're all built different, right?
Yep.
And we get to respect it. I love interdependence. We are better together. Doesn't mean we're identical.
Yes. And that's not codependent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very
You
different.
are your own people with your own experiences, and you are sharing them with each other. We talk about that a lot. It's so important. Oh my gosh, I love this so much.
Yeah.
How can someone start implementing this awareness into their lives? Like, I know we've talked about it, but there's like, how can we kind of round it out?
Yeah.
Or
like,
is there any last bit of...
No, I love that. It is like, if you're listening to this and it resonates, I just want to encourage that it's a journey. It's an evolution. It's a process, not a destination. Because I'm going to kind of answer the opposite, right? Like people who are on this path expect to arrive somewhere and to what I call the healed place or enlightenment. And it's an absolute farce. And so opening your heart to the fact that you're an evolutionary being, if you're interested in these topics, you're already in the right place. And I mean, I could say check out the Hearts Unleashed podcast, but keep listening here, like join forces and find communities that resonate, because like what we build might not resonate, and that's fine. But that there are like, maybe you can speak to it too, there's just unlimited the amount of resources, the amount of conversations happening, the real conversations happening. Because what I want to say is get clear. Like, what do you want? That's the number one thing, is like, it's not about what you don't want. What do you want? And then look for the aligned sources, because what's coming to me is like, it might be a physical journey. It might be a spiritual journey. It might be a financial journey. Like, you're going to start down a certain path. And if you walk that path, it's going to grow you. It's going to evolve you. And what has been true for me is the more you know, the more you grow. And the more you grow, the more you know. And so the more I've grown, the more I've been exposed to. I didn't know I was into chanting. I didn't know I'm a medicine woman or an angel. Like, there's so many layers that were not clear when I started. I started in the coaching realm, which was very 3D, very transformation oriented, self-help oriented, kind of
From
executive.
Here to here.
It had a little bit more of a corporate feel. And as I did that, it evolved into the spiritual journey. It evolved into the emotional journey. And so and like therapy. And I mean, there's all sorts of distinctions not to get into, but start somewhere and walk, and you'll feel, when you're willing and open, all of a sudden, like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So we can't predict for you who your best coach is, or who your spiritual mentor is, or who the next author you should read is. Which author over here, by the way?
Reader books.
Just kidding.
Great.
But just kidding, but also not, because they're really great. And in fact, there's two, all three of them are great, but giving up is very oriented around giving up people pleasing in order to live a life that pleases you. So it's very starter package. And then Alchemizing Judgment is much more, it's a dense book, but it is a guidebook.
Powerful.
Thank you. It's a guidebook for this stuff. So I just want to, I hope it's okay to offer that to the crew.
Absolutely.
Thank
yes,
you.
I will be linking all of it and the past episode we did as well. So you can
that's cool.
refer back to that.
Something
else that was coming through, and I don't know why, but it's like, this is wanting to come through. It's popped in a few times. Is that, in relationships in general, and I'm referring to partnership and parenting, because those are my personal references at this point, of you and your partner, just because they're not on that path with you now doesn't mean that they won't be ever, or that they aren't going on their own path too. And so background of like Mark and I moving to Bentonville, I've been in the self-help coaching space for 4 years now, because I started working with you in 2020. And Mark he didn't start working with coaches until 2022. And then we moved here, and I've kind of established like my routine with, building the courses that we're doing. And I have this flow that I've kind of grown into. And Mark, stepping away from therapy, is now on his own new path of development and figuring out who he is as a coach, and what does that look like, and how does he show up. And so I'm kind of like the neutral, kind of like stable, and watching him do these ups and downs of his personal journey now, and being that supportive person. And that doesn't mean that I have to fix him or step in and save him, because some of the things he's challenged with right now are really strong gifts of mine. And it would be easy for me to step in and be like, okay, well, like, let me do this for you. That's not helping him in any way. And so with kids, as a parent,
that's the best example. Let them fall, let them scrape their knee.
Yes, Rona broke her arm 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago now, and it was so simple. She was on the monkey bars, which I think is like the most common accident. They fall and try to catch themselves. And, you know, it happens. Or we want to hover and be like, oh, don't fall, don't get hurt. But it's like they have to explore the world and learn, you know. Oh, let me open this pouch for you. Let them struggle because that is how they become confident in themselves is through those challenges and figuring out how they can do something. And back to another piece you said about, it just made me think of like a conversation or the perception. Sometimes I will see Rona, our 5-year-old, like doing something and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, don't do that. And then if I would have taken 5 seconds to pause and observe what she was doing, I'm like, oh, well, that's really insightful. And, you know, she was really observant that this needed to be done and she's being helpful. I'm like, oh okay. You know, we're so quick to jump on through our perception, through our filter. Yeah. And kids are very capable.
That's very emotionally intelligent of you.
Thank you. You know, our partners are very capable as well. And I'm saying this in reference to, like, again, child rearing and stuff like that. I see a lot of women that have challenges of like, well, they can't do it like I do. Like, they're not supposed to. And they're going to bond with their child because of that, you know, because they're doing it in their own way, and that's okay. So I don't know. I kind of took us on another tangent and we'll bring it back.
That's perfect. And not to start a whole new episode, but like that's a key characteristic of martyr syndrome folks who like we relate to everyone as incompetent and therefore we are the ones for everything and everyone. And that's our burden and cross to bear and problem. And now we're resentful, but no one's given the chance to be competent because we're hovering and butt wiping and saving and bumper, you know, lanes and all that. And it just doesn't really, you're not empowering anybody. Yes. And so empowered people empower people. Yep. So if we're not empowered and then we're diminishing the people around us because we're all operating in fear, not super functional, right? But it's easier than the discomfort. Yes. So martyrdom or over serving and people pleasing is much easier than the discomfort of watching your kiddo go through their first heartbreak and you just like want to go strangle that other person or something, or like, or their kid's getting bullied and they have, you know, you have to like navigate that. Yeah. And so it is easier to jump in and save. However, that doesn't really save anybody. It doesn't strengthen anybody around you. So
it doesn't give them the skills to navigate that in the future on their own when you're not there.
And for myself, there's the wanting to save people, but there's also being perceived. So like I had a family member who was struggling and the best thing to do was to let them struggle. But I also didn't want to be perceived as abandoning them or not caring. Right. So I could leap into action, but again, that will not have them find their feet under themselves, you know? Yeah. So it's an interesting journey. So I liked where you were going with that. And there was something else to what you had started with asking that I thought I was picking up on, but it came and it went.
Yeah. And I was talking about like the relationships and going at your own journey, like pace, each of you. Yeah.
Thank you. Cause that was really awesome. It like so insightful cause there's awareness and then there's integration. Yes. Awareness is BS without integration. So you can think you know it all, but if you're not applying it all, BS. Okay. So I say that because we have those awakening moments, and just because it isn't happening now doesn't mean it's never gonna happen. Yes. Right. And so it's like, he needs to change. He needs to change. He needs to wake up. I have so many clients who are like, come with that idea. And it's like, well, let's just look inward first. Let's be with us. Yeah. Because if both of you were changing at the same time, like you're talking about that stability and support and rock and foundation. Yeah. Yeah. Someone needs to be grounded.
Yeah. We're both going, we're like, and we're both water signs anyway. So we're just very flowy and emotional and all the things anyways.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. So the growth periods, they're all by design, if you will. Like it's only in retrospect that you could really end up grateful. Like, thank God they weren't going through that. In fact, I'll tell you, my own thank God moment was my divorce occurred. Like, I started my year-long coaching program, and 3 days before it started, my husband said, I don't want to be married. And I'm like, it just blew everything wide open. And for months, I was down, out, questioning, confused. And it was like 6 months into the program that I was growing so rapidly, where I was able to understand the incompatibility. And I was like, oh my God, if he didn't leave me, maybe I would have left him.
Right.
Eventually. And so I was able to restore like a true sense of gratitude, like embody gratitude. Cause like I knew, I'm like, I'm all right. I'm going to be fine.
Okay.
This won't define me. This isn't the end of my life. Like I could reason with it.
Right.
But I was so deeply cut, so deeply hurt and feeling so inadequate. And then all of a sudden I was grateful for this like new chance at life, at love and all of that. And so I had to come around to it. But if I just stayed in like the timeline, do not be a victim of the timeline because everything works out. Like, and you just don't have the perception of the timeline. You can't comprehend how or why it's working the way it is, but you can trust that it is. And I'll tell you what, you want to accelerate your results, trust in the good outcome.
Yeah. We're in that right now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because when you hyperfixate on what's not working and feeling bad about it, that is what you're attracting. Like we could end up in a law of attraction episode. You know what I mean? So it's just like
you have a whole bunch on that.
Fear attracts fear, and gratitude attracts gratitude, and faith attracts faith. So you get to, if you can lean into, I am so confused, I am so scared, I don't get it, and I believe in it. Like I believe it will be good, and I believe it will be great. It will become better than I could ever possibly fathom or imagine or force my own hand at. Well, then great. Just lean into that. Yeah. And then you're at the frequency of like observing the little access points out of the chaos.
Yeah. You start noticing the little like signs and signals, whatever, you know, popping in like, oh, okay. Yep. We're on the right path. Keep going. Keep listening. So this was so good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for, I mean, driving all the way here. Didn't you say like you hadn't been to Arkansas before?
Yeah. Arkansas and Alaska. Those were the two.
So you're going to Alaska later.
I don't know. That's a few years, I think. I don't know. I want to go to Banff, Canada.
Oh, I heard
it's
really pretty. Yeah.
So we'll see. Canada's on the list. Alaska's on the list.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we checked off Arkansas. Yay. And I'm so glad we got to do this in person. And Mark even like, we're having these conversations on the couch and he's like, why are you guys just not recording right now? And we're
Get
like,
up there.
I don't know. So here we go. Yeah. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you, connect with you, anything that you want to share with them? Yeah. And we'll put all the links in the show notes.
Thank you. Yep. Heartsunleashed.com, AbigailGazda.com. My favorite social media place to hang out is Instagram. So if you want to hang out there. One more thing I want to say though, is I've been really focused on YouTube. So I have guided meditations on YouTube, and I also have a van channel called The Adventures of Abigail. So if you want to see my van adventures and my van build and Costa Rica adventures, like all sorts of fun stuff, it's all there. So good. So good. Oh, thank you, Abigail. This was so wonderful. I'm glad we got to have this conversation and share it with everybody else. See you later. Thank you all. We will see you next week.